Traditional cultures across the world recognize these differences. Certain hills, caves, springs, mountains, groves, and rivers were treated as sacred not because humans declared them sacred, but because the place itself revealed power. The spirits were already there. The current was already active. Human ritual was an act of relationship with something pre-existing. This is the foundation of land-based magic. The witch, sorcerer, mystic, or spirit worker was never separate from the environment around them. They entered into dialogue with it. They learned the personalities of places. They observed the movement of weather, animal patterns, celestial cycles, and seasonal shifts. They understood that consciousness does not end at the border of human skin. Modern occultism often becomes trapped inside rooms, candles on altars, diagrams in books, symbols on screens. There is nothing wrong with those things, but eventually you need to step outside and reconnect your practice to the larger body it emerged from. Magic divorced from the living world eventually becomes abstract. It becomes weak and sterile. The current fades because you are trying to generate everything from your own isolated mind rather than participating in the greater field around you. The earth is not passive matter, it is an active participant. And once you begin treating it that way, your practice changes. You start noticing that some places almost amplify ritual naturally. Certain beaches become ideal for cleansing work. Certain forests might deepen trance states. Certain urban locations become powerful for spirit communication or sigil activation or maybe dream work. You stop seeing the world as spiritually flat and begin recognizing that different environments carry different frequencies, just as different people carry different personalities. Does not require blind superstition. You do not need to believe every rock contains a literal spirit person hiding inside it. What matters is direct relationship and direct experience. Whether you frame these experiences psychologically, spiritually, energetically, or animistically is less important than the fact that the experiences themselves are real. The land affects consciousness, and consciousness affects the land. That relationship goes both ways. Think about places where intense human emotion has accumulated over long periods of time. Battlefields, graveyards, ancient temples, hospitals, ruins, sites of repeated ritual. Even people with no magical training often report strange sensations in such places. It could be heaviness or pressure or distortion of time, sudden emotion, unease, calm, presence, all of these things. Places absorb pattern. In magical traditions, this has sometimes been described as spiritual residue, memory, imprint, genius loci, or land spirits. Different cultures use different language, but they are often pointing toward the same underlying perception. Environments hold and transmit psychic and energetic information. You are constantly interacting with those fields, whether you notice it or not. Modern science is beginning, cautiously and imperfectly, to circle around ideas that older traditions accepted intuitively. We know environments affect neurochemistry. Light levels alter mood and cognition. Geomagnetic fluctuations influence biological systems. Sound frequencies shape emotional states. Human nervous systems respond continuously to atmospheric conditions, spatial arrangements, and environmental stimuli. The occult perspective simply extends this further. If consciousness is not isolated inside the brain but exists relationally within larger fields of interaction, then places themselves become participants in consciousness, not merely scenery, but active nodes within a living network. This is why power places exist. A power place is not necessarily famous or dramatic. It does not have to be Stonehenge, the pyramids, or Machu Picchu. Sometimes a power place is a forgotten patch of woodland behind an industrial area, a lonely hill outside town, a neglected cemetery, a bend in a river, a particular street corner, a ruin overtaken by weeds. What matters is not tourism value. What matters is resonance. You know it when you encounter it. Your breathing changes. Your awareness sharpens. The internal noise begins to thin out. Sometimes there is a sense of stillness so deep it feels almost physical. Other times there is a strange pressure in the atmosphere, as though something is waiting just outside ordinary perception. Animals may behave indifferently there. Dreams connected to the location may intensify. Meditation becomes easier. Synchronicities cluster around the place. The important thing is to approach these locations relationally rather than exploitatively. Modern occult culture often turns everything into extraction. How can I use this place? What can I get from it? How do I harness this energy? But older magical approaches were usually based on reciprocity, relationship before control. You introduce yourself to the land. You spend time there without demanding experiences. You observe. You listen. You make offerings. And gradually, the relationship develops. Offerings are not bribes. This is important to understand. You are not paying spirits like cosmic vending machines. Offerings create reciprocity and acknowledgement. They establish relationship. Water, bread, incense, tobacco, flowers, song, silence, prayer, poetry, careful cleaning of the environment, or simply genuine attention can all function as offerings depending on the tradition and the context. Attention itself is power. Most places are ignored. To truly notice a location changes your relationship with it. One of the simplest practices you can begin is choosing a nearby outdoor location and visiting it repeatedly over time. Not once, repeatedly. Different weather, different times of day, different emotional states. Just sit quietly. Observe how the place feels. Notice the sounds, the temperature shifts, animal movements, textures, smells, and emotional atmosphere. Pay attention to your dreams after visiting. Journal your impressions without forcing interpretation. And over time, patterns begin to emerge. You may notice that certain thoughts consistently arise there, certain symbols repeat, certain moods deepen. The place begins developing a kind of personality within your awareness. This is how a relationship with land begins, not with fantasy role play, but with sustained attention. And eventually you realize something else. The earth is not isolated from the sky. Ancient magical systems almost universally linked terrestrial currents with celestial movements. Astrology was never originally separate from the living world. The planets were not abstract psychological archetypes floating in empty space. They were intelligences, powers, and rhythms woven directly into earthly life. Planetary magic emerged from the observation that cosmic cycles and earthly conditions mirror one another. The tides respond to the moon. Seasonal cycles follow solar movement. Human sleep, fertility, emotion, migration, and biological rhythms are influenced by celestial patterns. Ancient people did not need telescopes to realize that the heavens and the earth moved together. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, is often oversimplified, but at its core is the recognition that reality behaves like an interconnected system of correspondences. Celestial movements influence terrestrial conditions, and terrestrial actions can symbolically align with celestial currents. This is why timing matters in magical work. Different planetary currents carry different qualities. Solar currents tend toward illumination, vitality, authority, visibility, identity, and life force. Lunar currents, on the other hand, may influence dreams, intuition, tides, emotion, memory, and psychic permeability. Saturnian currents, they slow, crystallize, restrict, protect, and define boundaries. Martial currents intensify force, conflict, courage, sexuality, and momentum. Venusian currents draw attraction, pleasure, beauty, harmony, and relational magnetism. These are not rigid stereotypes, they are living patterns. And these patterns can often be felt directly. Pay attention to how the world feels during a full moon versus a dark moon. Observe your dreams during storms. Notice the psychological atmosphere during seasonal transitions. Spend enough time watching natural cycles, and you begin understanding why ancient systems connected the movements of sky and earth. The world pulses. Everything moves in rhythms. Modern industrial culture attempts to sever humans from these rhythms. Artificial lighting disconnects us from night cycles. Climate-controlled buildings isolate us from weather. Digital environments flatten seasonal awareness. Many people barely notice lunar phases anymore. Time becomes mechanical rather than organic. And we have mobile phones and apps to find all of these things out, and we don't have to look up at the sky. But the nervous system still remembers. Part of magical practice is re-entering those rhythms consciously. This does not mean romanticizing nature or pretending civilization is evil. It means restoring sensitivity, becoming aware again of the larger systems you already exist inside. You're not separate from planetary forces. You are immersed within them constantly. One practical way to work with planetary currents is through observation before ritual. Before attempting elaborate ceremonies, simply track the atmosphere of different days and celestial events. And keep notes. Keep a journal. Observe your mood, your dreams, your synchronicities, energy levels, social interactions, and magical experiences during lunar phases or planetary hours. Over time, direct experience teaches more than memorizing tables from occult books ever will. Books provide maps, but maps are not territory. And this series has repeated that idea many times because it matters. Too many people approach occultism like information collection rather than perceptual development. They gather correspondences mechanically without ever cultivating sensitivity to the currents those correspondences are pointing toward. Real magic perception develops through relationship and embodied observation. You begin recognizing how certain locations combine with certain timings. A coastal ritual during a full moon feels very different from a Saturnian working in an abandoned industrial area at dusk. Forests carry different currents from deserts. Mountains behave differently from rivers. Cities possess their own spirits and energetic structures as much as wilderness does. Urban magic is still land-based magic. Concrete does not erase the current. In fact, cities often contain incredibly intense psychic concentrations because of the sheer density of human thought desire, grief, ambition, fear, and memory layered into them. Financial districts pulse differently from old residential neighborhoods. Train stations feel different from government buildings. Nighttime cities become entirely different entities from their daytime forms. Learn to read these shifts. The world is communicating constantly. Most people are simply too distracted to actually notice. But one thing you must also understand is that not every current is safe or beneficial. Just as some environments physically contain danger, some places carry psychological or spiritual volatility. There are locations where prolonged exposure feels destabilizing or draining or obsessive or emotionally corrosive. Sometimes this results from environmental factors. Sometimes it's human trauma. Sometimes something stranger. But discernment matters. Not every doorway should be opened. Not every place wants engagement. One of the most valuable skills in spirit work and land work is learning the difference between fascination and genuine alignment. Some places attract attention precisely because they are chaotic or predatory. Beginners often mistake intensity for spiritual depth. They are not the same thing. A place that leaves you exhausted, fragmented, paranoid, or compulsively fixated after repeated visits may not be healthy for you to engage with deeply. Respect your instincts, respect your nervous system. Magical practice should increase awareness and relationship, not destroy your psychological stability. Grounding matters. Boundaries matter. Reciprocity matters. The romantic fantasy of the reckless occult explorer charging blindly into every haunted ruin is mostly fiction. Experienced practitioners learn caution, respect, patience. The living land is not a theme park. It is an ecosystem of forces, intelligences, histories, and relationships. And you are part of that ecosystem, whether you acknowledge it or not. One of the deepest shifts that occurs through land-based practice is the gradual collapse of the illusion of separation. You stop. You stop experiencing yourself as an isolated consciousness floating through a dead universe. Instead, you begin recognizing participation everywhere, breath exchanging with trees, bodies shaped by gravity and sunlight, thoughts influenced by weather and architecture, emotion moving through environments, and dreams responding to place. The boundary between inner and outer becomes more fluid. This is not about losing individuality. It's about understanding interconnection. The old magical traditions often described initiation not as escaping the world, but as becoming more fully woven into it. The initiate learned to perceive the hidden relationships linking stars, stones, rivers, spirits, symbols, bodies, seasons, and consciousness itself. A living network, a living current. And perhaps this is one of the greatest things modern people have forgotten. The world is not silent. It has never been silent. Beneath traffic, algorithms, artificial lighting, and digital noise, the old currents are still moving. The moon still pulls the tides, storms still alter human mood, forests still affect consciousness. Ancient places still dream beneath modern cities. The land still responds to attention, ritual, memory, and presence. You do not need to escape civilization to reconnect with this. You simply need to begin noticing again. Go outside without headphones. Watch how a place changes after rain. Pay attention to the feeling of different neighborhoods. Observe how your mind shifts beneath certain trees or near moving water. Track the moon for a month. Sit quietly somewhere long enough for the world to stop being background scenery. And eventually, something changes. The world stops feeling empty. The land begins speaking in impressions, patterns, intuitions, moods, and synchronicities. Not always dramatically, often subtly, but unmistakably. Because the current was always there. You were simply taught not to feel it.